She had devoted her life to looking after others, raising other people's children, mending wounds that weren't hers. But when she most needed it, no one so much as recalled her name. 30 years were lost in silence, hidden behind the walls of a forgotten care home. Until one day, a familiar face walked into those doors, and what he found would destroy all he believed about his past, his privilege, and his mother. Because some stories aren't lost, they're hidden. Daniel Hayes lived the kind of life that people fantasize about. Penthouse views, designer cars, his name on charity plaques throughout the city for years. A self-made millionaire who was widely respected for his charity and ambition. To others, he was evidence that success could overlook the anguish of the past. But Daniel was aware of something different. Behind every smile at a fundraiser, behind every handshake for the camera with city officials, there was always this silence that refused to leave him. The silence of not knowing where he had really come from. He was raised in the system, instructed that his birth mother had vanished, leaving behind only an old picture and a note. Take care of him. He kept that note in his wallet for 30 years, creased at the edges, as if refusing to release it was proof that he hadn't quit. Yet he buried the questions under work, drive, and the applause that came from fixing others. Until that winter morning, a charity committee asked him to drop by a nursing home in one of the city's poorest areas. He nearly declined. It wasn't part of his normal orbit, but something about the invitation stuck. Perhaps it was the name of the home, or perhaps it was the way the soft pain would rise up each time he caught an elderly woman smiling at him with gratitude. He didn't know it then, but that decision, to say yes, to show up, would pull him straight into the past he thought was gone forever. Because beyond those faded hallways and fragile voices, a truth was waiting. One that would force him to confront not just who he was, but what the world had done to the woman who once called him son. The ride to the nursing home passed Daniel by a section of the city that he did not see very often anymore. The one where glass skyscrapers gave way to dilapidated brick and sidewalks that spoke of hardship. He'd been there before, many years ago, but the memory came to him only in glimpses. The sound of children's laughter, the low hum of a woman's singing, the heat of hands that once cradled his. When he walked in, the air was slightly scented with disinfectant and solitude. The receptionist, an older woman with weary eyes, smiled graciously as she took him down a dimly lit corridor lined with tattered photographs, faces that seemed abandoned by the world. Daniel walked carefully, his shining shoes echoing on the worn linoleum. He was there to speak about community support and kindness, but his focus landed on the whispers of the environment, the creak of wheelchairs, the empty coughs from behind half-shut doors. And then, in the corner of the common room, he spotted her, a waif of a woman, parchment-like skin, silver-white hair, hands shaking a little as she sang to herself. Something in the melody stopped him. It was the same lullaby from his earliest recollections, the same song that had soothed him when the world had been too large, too cold. He didn't understand why his chest constricted, only that he couldn't turn away. "Who is she?" he whispered. The nurse hesitated. "This is Martha. She's been here for a long time. No visitors, no family. Records indicate she worked as a caretaker, perhaps a nurse. Difficult life." Daniel nodded, but the name hit something profound. Martha. It couldn't be. He requested to have her file shown to him. The nurse initially refused, privacy policies. But when he let her know his foundation's donation, doors opened. And what he saw in the file stopped his pulse. Born in 1958, ex-caretaker, one son, adopted out through the state system after racial threats made her leave her home. The last address she had corresponded with the foster home Daniel had arrived from. He knew the earth underneath him was shaken. She wasn't a stranger. She was his mother. But how did she come to be here? Erased, discarded, forgotten. He inquired around, piecing together bits of her life. Martha had lost her job in the hospital after being fired for causing unrest when she complained of racial abuse after losing him. No one employed her thereafter. A single mother, classified as a troublemaker, and no place to call home. Poverty finally caught up, sickness followed, and the world, caught up in praise for progress, never looked back. Daniel stood outside her door, shaking. 30 years of searching, and here she was, breathing, fragile, clueless. He needed to run inside, to tell her everything. That he'd succeeded, that her sacrifices didn't count for nothing. But shame stayed his hand. How could he approach her knowing he'd lived in style while she was left behind? He pushed a hand against the door jamb, hearing her hum this same lullaby. The sound of it shattered him. For in that moment, he knew something that hurt, his success, his charity, his speeches about equality. They had all been in a world that remembered not women like her. And as the nurse called his name, asking if he was ready to meet her, Daniel hesitated. The moment he stepped through that door, nothing would ever be the same again. The door creaked open, and time slowed. Daniel entered, the air full of antiseptic and a hint of lavender lotion. Martha turned to him, eyes far away but kind. The kind that had once made the world seem safe. For a moment she didn't know who he was. She simply smiled nicely, the way she would greet a stranger walking by. He attempted to speak, but his voice faltered. 30 years of silence, of unanswered questions, all coming crashing down in one breath. "It's me," he breathed. "It's Daniel." Her eyes fluttered, confusion, denial. Then something more profound. Tears rose up, quivering on the lashes. She extended a frail hand, her fingers tracing his cheek. "My baby?" she breathed, the words quivering like prayer. He nodded, and the dam burst. She cried softly, years of anguish pouring out in gasps that racked her frail body. Daniel clung to her, sensing each rib, each network of scars on a life the world had seen fit to overlook. He wanted to think that this moment would repair all, but healing does not come readily when the wound is injustice. As they sat there, a nurse came in, asking him to move out. The home director had heard what he was, the rich benefactor, the public figure, and now they suddenly wanted to speak. Papers were brought in hastily, apologies prepared. They talked of regrettable oversights, limited funds, and systemic failures, as if the words could screen the callousness of allowing a woman to disappear in broad daylight. Daniel's fists balled. For years, he'd paid checks to organizations that had promised change, but now he realized the reality. Charity didn't mend a system that was never designed to care for individuals like his mother. He gazed back through the pain at Martha, alone once more in her chair, humming that same song to herself. Her voice broke on the last note, trailing off into nothing. That was when Daniel realized he couldn't simply be her son. He needed to be her voice. Because what had happened to her wasn't an error. It was a trend, one that had taken away too many mothers and left too many sons questioning why the world never knocked. And this time, he wasn't going to remain quiet. The world knew Martha's name on the morning after. Daniel would not allow her tale to become another silent tragedy lost under the din of progress. He stood in front of cameras, not as a millionaire or philanthropist, but as a son. He spoke to them of the woman who had sacrificed everything for a nation that offered her nothing back. Of a system capable of constructing skyscrapers and space programs, but managed to lose a mother who once kept it together at the seams with her bare hands. His phrase went viral. But fame wasn't what he sought. It was accountability. Nursing homes throughout the state were probed, hidden files brought to light, policies revised. But Daniel knew nothing could undo the years his mother had spent isolated. He sat beside her every day until her last breath, holding her hand as each heartbeat grew weaker, vowing she would never be made to disappear again. At her funeral, The crowd overflowed. The same city leaders who had turned a blind eye to her before now stood alongside those who'd experienced her struggle. Daniel didn't talk about forgiveness. He talked about responsibility. Because racism doesn't always have a hood or come armed. Sometimes it disguises itself in paperwork, in budgets, in silence. As the sun set over her grave, he placed the worn note she'd written decades ago, "Take care of him," representing, beneath the flowers. This time, he whispered back, "And I'll take care of them." Martha's story became more than a headline. It became a mirror, forcing people to see what they'd been too comfortable ignoring. For every statistic, there is a mother who never gave up hope, a son who never gave up looking, and a country still finding out what justice actually is. So the question is, how many more mothers must vanish before we determine their lives are as important as our convenience?